Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and I have attorney Josh Robertson with me. Hey Josh.
Hi, how's it going?
Awesome. And today we're going to be talking about how to structure your real estate wholesaling business. And so we're going to go over all things real estate wholesaling. Most importantly is what the heck is it?
Before I was um, kind of steeped in Anderson, uh, I didn't know what real estate wholesaling was, and it blew me away when I
Mhm.
first talked about it. So, what it is you, independent person, whoever you are, go out, you find property deals. Could be local to you, could be anywhere, but you find the property deals and you get those deals under contract. You sign a purchase and sales agreement, get them under contract. And then during the due diligence process, what you're doing is you're going to go out and you're going to find the end buyer for the property. And so that process of going out, finding the property deals, getting those under contract, finding the end buyer, and then arranging with the end buyer to pay you what is a finder's fee on top of the payment price for the property, that process is real estate wholesaling. Now, one of the first things you're going to run into with real estate wholesaling is everyone that you talk to about is going to say, you can't do that. It's illegal. You got to have a real estate license. You got to do 700 other things. No, that's not true. There are some jurisdictions where you do need certain licenses to be involved in the buying and selling of real estate for other people. But just the general process and engaging in the process of doing these real estate wholesale deals, there's nothing illegal about it. It's going out, finding a product, in this case, the property, and providing a service to someone who wants to buy the product. Very much like a wholesaler of goods.
So they're not representing anybody. They're just putting a property under contract, and then they're either selling the rights to that contract to somebody, maybe, and I'll ask you this to kind of explain in a
Yeah.
little bit of how they get paid.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they're selling the contract, maybe they're getting paid out of closing, or maybe they just buy the property and then sell it again. Are those all examples of wholesaling?
Right. So any one of those options is an example of wholesaling. The goal for most wholesalers is to go out, find the property, get it under contract, attach their finder's fee to it, and then find a willing buyer that's going to step into their shoes and purchase the property. That's kind of, I would say that's kind of the hope, because you can get involved in this type of real estate investing with very little money and do everything appropriately. And you can kind of build up your real estate bona fides in getting started this way. There's very low bars to entry. However, sometimes you get the property under contract, and you can't sell the contract, right? You can't assign the contract. And so you would have to close on the purchase of that property in your own name, but no one's stopping you from turning around and then selling that property again at a profit to somebody else who's willing to buy at a higher price point.
Yeah, it's all about the purchase and sale agreement. I've been involved in hundreds of these, and it just differs depending on where you are and what your relationship is with the wholesaler. A lot of
Mhm.
times they're just taking a fee. Hey, here's a deal I found for you, $2,500, and it's yours.
Yep.
$5,000, it's yours.
Hmm.
Or you're going to a closing and you're saying, hey, here's a property. I'll use an example. I bought a building for, I think it was like 70,000, and I was like, dang, that's a really good deal. Some brothers were having issues in probate court. Well, the wholesaler had it under contract at 30, right? So you go to closing and they made most of the money, but the family just wanted to be done with that thing, like just get it off. So he knew he was making a great deal.
Hmm.
Some people would get upset at that and go, hey, you really made a too huge a fee, but I don't think there is any such thing. Or you just go out and you buy a property,
Hmm.
and you don't want anybody to know. You
Hmm.
don't really care. Like, you're not going to wait. You're just putting it under contract. You buy it and then you immediately sell. They call that a double close.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's at the same time, and you have two transactions, and all those have all these wonderful issues. Let's talk about some of the issues that come along.
Yeah.
Number one, tax, and there's also risk, right? On all of these, you just mentioned you might have to close.
Hmm.
How do you prevent some of the negatives that come along,
Oh,
and how do you structure this in such a way to protect yourself?
right. So the first thing that you want to know about moving forward is, how are you going to make money doing this? Right? I said that this is a low bar to entry. It's very easy to get started. You can build up some good cash with this, but you got to know how to make your money. So what you do, you go out, you find 123 Main Street. It's a property, and it's for sale for $10,000. We'll use easy numbers because big numbers confuse me. That's just what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You go out, you go contact the buyer, you get the property under contract for $10,000. And then you immediately start looking for someone to sell that property to for $20,000, right? So you would say to me, Josh, property's only being sold for $10,000. Yes, but your time, effort, energy, everything that went into finding this property needs to be remunerated to you. So you tack on $10,000, understanding that this is a good deal for other maybe end line property investors. So what you do, just like any other property, you go to the buyer, you say, I'm willing to purchase this property, 123 Main, from you for $10,000. You enter into a contract. That's the first step. No matter what happens after the first step, that's always the first step. Now, second step, you've got to find somebody to take your place. So let's start with selling the contract, right? You can validly sell a contract as long as the terms of the contract allow you to sell it to somebody else. So you go through the purchase and sales agreement, you look to see what options you have. This purchase and sales agreement in our first hypothetical says you are able to sell this contract.
It's usually what and or assign. So
Mm-hmm.
would you ever have a client do this in their individual name, like, hey, here's Toby Mathis,
Mm-hmm.
and or assigns, or would you always use some sort of entity?
No, no. For lots of reasons that we're going to talk about, tax and asset protection being the two of them, you shouldn't be putting down your own name. You should be putting down an entity's name. Now, typically, the way we instruct our clients to do it, you'll use what we call a wholesale trust. A wholesale trust is a grantor trust, very similar to a land trust or a living trust, and you set it up. You don't need an attorney to set it up. You can set up the trust. You do it very simply. It's a very simple trust. And you put down the name of the trust is going to be, for this example, 123 Main Street Trust. You are going to be the trustee of the trust, buyer, and the beneficiary of the trust is going to be an entity that you own. Usually this entity is going to be a C corporation. Now, before all of the accountants and otherwise informed people start screaming about C corporations and double taxation, we're using the C corporation here very, very strategically. And the main reason we're using it is because we want to avoid the issue of dealer status. The intricacies of dealer status go beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but essentially it's a personal kind of like tax brand that gets put on people where when they buy certain assets, those assets are used as inventory and they can't be depreciated. They can't have anything, any losses taken against them. You lose a lot of tax advantages. Now, typically in the wholesale space, dealer status isn't going to be a problem. But if you get personally branded with that dealer status, it travels with you. It's hard to get rid of. And so we want to use the C corporation because that's the easiest way to avoid the dealer status. Now,
for you individually.
For you individually. Mm-hmm.
There's other videos on this channel about dealer status, but in a nutshell, it's no different than if you were selling cars.
Mm-hmm.
You have inventory, you don't have depreciation, you don't get to 1031 exchange, you don't get installment sales, and it's all treated as active ordinary income. So what you're doing is an active business. But aside from that, when you're wholesaling, you are an active business. That's the thing to take away, whether you're in construction, a real estate agent, or a dealer, you're an active business. So let's just put them all in that category. And it sounds like from a tax standpoint, you're driving it towards a corp, and you're using a trust to take title.
So that
you don't have your corp on $1 million.
so that the
properties
corp
that are
isn't
wholesale.
all over the place taking title to all of these
Mhm.
properties. Instead, we have 123 Main Trust, and then we have, 234 Washington Trust, and however and so on,
Mhm.
getting all of these contracts under its name.
Yeah.
So you put the contract in the name of the trust, pointed to the corporation, so that no matter how you get paid, whether you assign the contract to somebody from the trust, or if you have to go to the closing table, close in the name of the trust, and then change the ownership either by selling the property again, doing the double close, or by amending the trust, which you can do, the money goes from that trust into the corporation.
Let me interject here real
Yeah.
quick, just so I make sure everybody understands.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're using a trust, you're breaking it from, you have legal title and equitable title,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have these two things where I have a name that's on there, but I have the person that gets the right to the money, collect rents, and
Mm-hmm.
all that good stuff. And in a trust, you're just breaking those into two pieces. You're taking legal title, but you could sell
Mm-hmm.
that equitable title, right? So you
Yep.
could sell the beneficial interest. So that corporation, in theory, could say, "Hey, I want to sell it to Joe Schmo over here.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the right to sit in my shoes."
Yep.
And they could take a dollar amount, and then you step right in their shoes. Of course, the first thing that beneficiary is going to do is fire that
Fire the
trustee
trustee.
and put their own trustee. Yep, that's exactly. So like this is actually pretty cookie cutter. I get you from there. Just want to make sure everybody's following along,
No,
because
absolutely.
there's a big reason why we're doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not just because we like to not have our names on things. It's because we want to isolate the liability and create the tax benefits. Carry it from there.
And so those two things are true. The other thing that is really really useful about these wholesale trusts is that if you take title in a trust, you don't have to worry about the and or assigns language in the property and
Yep.
sales agreement. You can legally amend the trust so that you are no longer the trustee, the person that set it up, that the beneficiary is someone else. And so as soon as they pay you for the right to step in your shoes and deal with this seller of the property, you get your money, you amend the trust, they fire you as the trustee, step in as the trustee, and off you go. So there's a lot of reasons to do it this way, and we like it for all of those reasons. The other reason we really like it is because you can do this, it's repeatable. There aren't laws in any states barring you from doing this. This is a simple grantor trust. It's a common law trust, something that anybody can utilize, and it's something
Mhm.
that's going to be useful for you for a long time.
Lawyers out there are going to immediately jump in and say, "But my state doesn't have a statute for these wholesale trusts or land trusts
Mhm.
or whatever." What do you say to those folks?
You don't need one because it's a grantor trust, which is a common law trust. Common law, by
Mhm.
definition, precedes statutes. So living trusts, even if jurisdictions didn't have uniform trust statutes, which a lot of them do, but even if they didn't, you could still create and utilize a living trust to bypass probate at the time of your death because it's a common law trust. From our shared history and legal history with England and lots of other things, we have developed these tools that we utilize. And those principles still undergird our legal foundation. So you don't need a statute to have a wholesale trust or to legitimize what we're doing here. The legal process that we've inherited and that we utilize allows for these to happen regardless of statutes or other implementations that the state may take.
Fantastic. So let's go back. So you're a wholesaler. You have three ways you could exit.
Mm-hmm.
Exit number one is you assign it, you take a fee.
Mm-hmm.
Exit number two is uh, maybe you take a fee, but you go to the closing table and you're getting paid out of it
Mm-hmm.
as a instead of just signing it over before close, you're going to sign it over at close.
Mm-hmm.
And number three is you're doing a double close. Are they all treated the same from a tax standpoint? And also how does that kind of blend with the asset protection side?
If you've set up the structure the way that we've talked about with the wholesale trust going into the C corporation, they're not going to be treated differently from a tax perspective. All of the money's going to go into the C corporation, and then you have the control of how that money is treated once it's in the C corporation. You could pay it out to yourself as a salary, which is not going to be double taxed. You could use it to do medical reimbursements, which is not going to be taxed at all if you do it right. You could use it for a lot of things and get it out of the C corporation for your benefit. But as long as you've set it up this way, money goes into the C corp. You are in charge. You are in charge of the C corporation. You get to decide how the money's going to move from there. And it's all going to be active income. Just like you said, even though this is real estate investing, it's a type of real estate investing like development and construction where it's active income. It doesn't fall under the passive income rules that other real estate investing does.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're going to take advantage of all the different types of deductions that are available to corporations that aren't available to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do your accountable plan. You're going to reimburse yourself administrative office for the home, probably 280A, the Augusto rule.
Mm-hmm.
Probably reimburse yourself for things like cell phone, using internet in your home, all those fun things
Mm-hmm.
that businesses enjoy that you and I don't. And then if there's money still in there, you could pay yourself a salary. You could probably do a 401k and defer most, if not all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And or just take yourself a nice little salary, or you're using it to run other businesses and do other
Make
things,
other
or you just leave
investments.
it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or you leave it in the corp and let it be taxed
And
at 21%
yeah,
and deal with it later.
if you're at a high W-2 income, you don't want to take a salary. You've maxed out all of the tax benefits that you talked about. You park the money and have it taxed at 21% instead of 38%, the highest marginal tax bracket. So,
All right, let's talk about liability for a second.
Mhm.
Since we have a structure, we're driving it towards a corp. Is there ever a situation where you might say, hey, you need another layer?
For wholesaling, probably not. And the reason I say that is because the idea is to exit so quickly, and the owner of the property, if you've set it up the way that we've discussed, is never going to be you. It's never going to be
unless you're doing the double close.
Unless you're doing the double close. But there again, so let me take a step back. If you do it in a wholesale trust without the double close, your name's never going to be on title anywhere. You're not going to show up. So is there risk from a legal perspective? A little bit, but not much, not enough to really keep you up at night. There's some financial risk. I'm sorry, Toby.
Maybe fraud or misrepresentation, right? You
Right.
give it to here's the thing. Let's be real. With wholesalers, it's almost always a group of investors that they're wholesaling to. It's the same people over and over again, right? And you're building up your list. So here's the 20 people that I like to sell properties to. They give you a laundry list, is what I'm looking for. You go out and find it. You bring it to them. You're the guy that's doing the sending out the little postcards, calling people, texting people, putting up bandit signs. I buy ugly houses, or I buy houses for cash. You're telling people I'll get you out of a bad situation. You negotiate it, and then you have your buyers in the background. You're not getting sued from those folks, right? But if the seller decides they're going to try to do something and say, hey, and you took title, there's some exposure there. Is there a way to isolate that liability?
Yeah. So the best way to do it is to have layers within the structure. How would I do that if I were the one doing it? What I would do is I would have the C corporation. I would have an LLC above that. And every time I got a new trust, a wholesale trust with a property in it, I would have that wholesale trust point to the LLC, not the C corporation.
That's brilliant. That's perfect. So you're isolating the liabilities. So at the end of the day, the C corp, and again in English, there's one tax return when you're setting up the layers. These are disregarded LLCs for tax purposes. So you're not creating another tax return, but you are creating another individual to be responsible for liability.
For liability.
You could do. Yeah. And you're just isolating the liability for corporation because it's your running business. So maybe you're doing the same thing you do with a flipper, right? You say because literally that's what you're doing. You're just not rehabbing the property.
You're just keeping your hands clean. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see that working really, really well. And then you're just setting up an LLC every time you do a transaction, or you kind of monitor your risk. You're like, hey, I'm willing to take a hit. I'll do 10.
Right.
Right. And then I'll switch to another one. Right.
So you could do it in series. So you would have one LLC that's between the land trust or the the wholesale trust and the C corporation for either a set amount of equity or amount of money, or a set number of properties, close that, open another one, and keep going.
That makes sense. And that sounds, yeah, you're isolating the liability again. Somebody's saying, well, why would I set this up? You'll understand once you've been tased a couple times in the real estate world. It's a great place to make a lot of money, but there's people trolling around there looking to take it away too. And there is risk. And so it's just, let's mitigate that risk
and
make it to where you're the smallest target as possible.
Right. And yeah, anytime you invest, like any investment house or brokerage company is going to tell you, all of these things involve risk. But there are very easy steps to take to mitigate a lot of that. Can't get it to zero, but we can get it really close.
How does somebody get a hold of you so that they could set up a wholesale trust, so that they can actually set up a structure so that they mitigate their risk and get tax benefits? And by the way, the tax benefits should usually outweigh the cost of anything you do. They usually is putting money back in your pocket. There's a lot of tax benefits.
It's easy to do, and there are a lot of tax benefits. Easiest way to get a hold of me is to just email me directly here at Anderson.
I'll put it in the show notes. So you don't have to say it. And we'll put a link in there, so if somebody is actually interested in reaching out to you, that they can do so very easily.
Yeah. And we're always happy to talk to you about them.
Yep. So we try to make it easy, guys. Thank you, Josh, for coming in and explaining how to structure real estate wholesaling business. It's one of those weird areas. I get it all the time. Somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I can't do that in my state." I think Illinois, you can't do it. Like there's a few states that make it a little bit of a pain. Are there any others I'm missing?
Washington is the only other one. And it's not that you can't do it. They just make you jump through some hoops.
So there's a little, make sure you talk to somebody before you're doing it in those states. Otherwise, it's pretty much, yes, you can. If you're a real estate agent, you may have some rules about disclosure to a client because you have other rules you put yourself under by getting your license. But, Joe Schmoes like me, who just want to go out there and wholesale, I could do it easy.
Yep.
I do it all the time. We do it all the time because we find deals, and you're always looking for deals. And there's whole operations that are looking for properties. And sometimes they have more properties than they have funds for, and they wholesale them off to all their friends and other folks and people on their list. So some of you guys are probably on that list.
Yeah. And I mean, you and your investor friends don't make any secret about you use wholesalers frequently because you're busy doing things that will increase your return more, but you still want to invest.
Hey, I do what I do best. You do what you do best. Everybody should do what they do best. In real estate, it's really tough to be the jack of all trades. You find people that are really good at wholesaling. You utilize them to find you great properties that you wouldn't otherwise get access to, and they're worth every nickel. And what you just laid out, Josh, is a way to make it into a nice business structure so that you can mitigate, make sure you never put yourself in a bad situation, or that if something goes awry, that it doesn't cost you. And you're able to also run it like a business, and there's a lot of tax benefits for that. So I thank you for coming on and sharing. Is there anything else?
No, everything's good, but keep working at it.
Yep. Perfect. Then links are in the show notes. Thanks again.
Thank you.